Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar today, Elevating Your A/B Testing Strategy with SessionCam. Joining me today is James Harbour with SessionCam. One second. We hope that by the end of this webinar, you'll have some great ideas on how to integrate SessionCam with your experimentation stack to create the best experiences for your users. The recording of this webinar will be available afterwards on our website. We will have time for questions at the end, so use the questions panel in GoToWebinar, and James and I will try to get to all of your questions at the end. Our contact info will also be provided for anyone who'd like to reach out for additional questions after the webinar. So let's get started. So just a little bit about InfoTrust. InfoTrust is an independent analytics consultancy and product development company. We're Google partners, headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, and also have offices in Columbus, where I'm located, Chicago, Barcelona, and Dubai. We offer a full stack of services from conversion rate optimization, data compliance and security, technical implementation and support, reporting and insights, as well as digital analytics strategy and data science. So a lot of different options, as well as SessionCam partners. And here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to learn more about the features of SessionCam and why you should be A/B testing, of course, and how SessionCam plays into your A/B testing strategy. So first, let's just start off with a brief poll, which will pop up here in a second. What, if any, session recording tool do you currently use? Go ahead and enter your answer. I'll give you just a moment to complete those. And it's fine if you have never used a session recording tool. You're going to learn all about SessionCam today and some of those features. All right, looks like most people have answered. So it looks like a number of you are using SessionCam already or have already started to use some type of session recording tool to supplement your analytics or possibly A/B testing. Great. Well, let's kick it off with talking a little bit more about SessionCam and its features. James, I'll turn it over for you to cover the next several slides.
Brilliant, thank you, Melanie. Yes, hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, I'm James Harbour, as you saw there, product manager at SessionCam. It's a pleasure to join this today and to talk you through the different areas of SessionCam and how they help integrate with your A/B testing strategy. But a little bit about SessionCam to start off. So I know a lot of you use SessionCam, but just bring up to speed on all of the features, and anyone who doesn't, just to help understand exactly what it is we do. So we're based in the UK, based in a little place called Norwich, a couple of hours from London. We came to market in 2009 as a session replay solution. Since then, it's been a long time. So we've built on the accuracy of the replays, and we've ensured that the data we've captured provides us with the ability to populate a series of different reports aimed, I guess, to cater for understanding every interaction there is with your site for every visitor. We've based a lot of our reports on machine learning more recently and introduced grading at both session and page level, and that provides an incredibly efficient way of finding the biggest issues and also the biggest opportunities for kind of the least amount of work. We've introduced ways to analyze almost every area of the site now, so anything from the content that sits on more of the static areas of the site right the way through to conversion rate optimization through journeys and paths and flows. We have reports to cater for all of those. Our reports are based around efficiency and accuracy, as mentioned, and that's really top priority. And we continually add to the console to ensure that we are completely up to speed and we have everything you need in terms of tools to be able to complete the jobs that you need to. So we'll just take a look briefly at some of the ones listed below. So session replay, this is the core of SessionCam. This is what we're really proud of. And the session replay that we have, the ability to show exactly what the customer was seeing when they're engaging with your site, really proud of how that replay works. It's really important to remember that with session replay tools, you need to ensure that when you're watching a replay back, you're seeing the exact version of the site or the exact version of the page that the customer was seeing. And that's never more important than in terms of A/B testing. We capture every interaction across desktop, mobile, and tablet. We replicate that in the playback screen you can see on the right-hand side. So we show all the interactions, the clicks, the swipes, scrolls, touches, everything shown and highlighted within the playback screen. You can see absolutely how people are engaging and absolutely what their experience was like through that particular video. We can then aggregate up all of the data that we have for all of those session replays, and it allows us to populate other reports such as heat maps. And heat maps are a great way to look, or to aggregate, I guess, the average behavior we see across all visitors on a particular page. Heat maps allow you to see, what content people are viewing, how far down the page they get, on average, what are they clicking or hovering on most. And it's a great way, I guess, to visualize all of that interaction. So instead of having to watch numerous replays, actually a heat map can provide you with a great starting point to understand the basics of the page before you then dig in and look for other things around the replays themselves. Alongside the replays and the heat maps, we have several other reports. So one of those, and one of our kind of key reports, is error detection. Now, this is one of the most popular areas as well. So we automatically capture all the error messages which are shown to visitors on the site. We capture JavaScript errors which are happening in the background as well. And it allows us to populate a report based entirely on how many times errors are seen, and also the impact they're having on the overall experience the customer's having while they're using the site. We can put it into monetary terms, how much of an impact an error has based on the purchase value or the average value we have against a particular user, and whether an error impacts them dropping off or not going on to achieve what we want them to achieve on the site. We can also see an impact on what we call customer struggle score, which I'll come to in just a second. And errors are a really easy and quick way of optimizing certain areas. Normally, error messages are quite easy to change, and they're also quite a good area for A/B testing as well in terms of simplicity. So errors is one of the more kind of popular reports within SessionCam, very easy to use and no setup required. And I also mentioned in there that we have something called customer struggle score. Now, customer struggle score, you can see kind of in the second part of this slide, that kind of sits at the core of SessionCam along with our session replay. And struggle score came in around, that's about 3.5 years ago now. And it allows us to look at all the behavior shown across all the sessions to a particular page, and we can grade that page and also the session themselves on the likelihood that there was struggle or friction occurring. We can take a look at what the average user was doing, what the average behavior was, the average time on page, for example, how many clicks were there on average, how many times are people having to revisit the same page. There's lots of different behaviors which feed into it, but it allows us to set a benchmark. When there are visitors that sit outside that benchmark, when there are visitors that don't show the average behavior and they show more or less of certain behaviors, we can highlight those as struggle, and that populates both within the sessions that I mentioned and also at page level, which is what the struggle pages report shows. So struggle pages is a great starting point to understand the areas of the site, the pages within the site that hold the biggest opportunity to improve. And again, one of the more popular reports because it's a great starting point for those particular things, particularly around A/B testing as well. We also capture, as I mentioned, journeys and flows and paths through the site. We have different ways of doing this. So one of the ways we have is called key journeys, and that allows us to look at popular flows through the site based on how many people are taking those paths and whether they convert or don't convert, again, based on what it is we want those visitors or customers to achieve. That automatically populates, it's dynamic, and it sort of changes, fluctuates over a course of time. We also have funnels, very similar to what you would see within, say, Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics or any of the analytics solutions available. We can build up those funnels, and then we can dig right down from looking at an overall conversion rate to going right down to a particular field within a form on a particular page to see how that particular field performs, and also how it goes on to impact whether visitors convert or don't convert. So there's lots of different ways to monitor the flows through the site through the key journey section. And then finally, I mentioned the content analysis part of SessionCam. One of the latest features to be added, known as page analysis, allows us to dig in and start to look at all of the content that sits on a page. And that starts right from kind of link level all the way through to kind of other elements which sit on the pages, text and images, navigations. Anything that sits on the page can be grouped together. We can create a zone, and we can look at how that zone performs again against a goal which we want visitors or customers to achieve. So understanding whether people should be clicking or hovering on images, whether people think they can click on a link that's not working. Page analysis offers quite a wide range of different ways to analyze that customer behavior on that particular page level. I think that's a good enough introduction to SessionCam. Melanie.
Yeah, thanks, James. That's some great details on the features, and we'll definitely give some examples of how you can use all of these features to enrich your A/B testing strategy. So first, we're just going to talk a little bit about, what is A/B testing, why you should be A/B testing. So essentially, A/B testing is a form of optimization. So this is the process of using controlled experimentation, usually A/B testing, multivariate testing, or possibly personalization, to improve your site's ability to drive your business goals or conversions. We also may call this conversion rate optimization or CRO. And it's really taking you from just descriptive analytics and collecting data to moving, up the chain to optimization and how we can predict what may happen if we make some changes and determine how we can make the outcomes that we want actually happen. So in a nutshell, that's why we do A/B testing. That's why we do things like session recording, to really understand those user journeys and how we can improve them. So what are conversions? So if you're using an analytics tool, which I'm sure a lot of you are, this may be something that you're reporting on a regular basis. So, some key outcome that you want a visitor to do during their session. So some of these desired goals may be macro conversions or micro conversions. So macro conversions for those of you that are, engaged in e-commerce could be, purchasing a product from the site, requesting a quote, subscribing to a service, or you may also be looking at micro conversions that kind of support users as they move towards those larger conversions. So subscribing to email, creating an account, adding a product to the cart. These are all conversions that we can work on improving through A/B testing and look for opportunities for improvement through session recording. And why is optimization important? It's especially important now with a lot of things that are going on in the world. So to really improve user experience and generate the new customers, but also keep existing customers happy. It also helps us to increase customer insights with data that is already possibly available to you if you're already using these tools. So testing helps you take the guesswork out of optimization and enables data-driven decision making. And then finally, lowering the cost per acquisition. At a time when we may all be looking at ways to cut some of our budgets, this is a great opportunity to increase conversions without increasing marketing spend. So how can we use the data that we have available to get the most out of our existing site? So really quick, just another poll. Which, if any, of these A/B testing tools have you used in the past? And I'll give you a couple moments to respond here. All right, it looks like most of you have responded. Most of you are currently using or have used some type of A/B testing tool in the past. Lots of people using Google Optimize and some people using Optimizely. All right, So I will pass it to James to talk a little bit about some of the A/B testing integrations that SessionCam offers.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, so a key, I guess, to getting the most from the tools you use is having the integrations there and having them readily available and easily integrated. So we integrate with a range of different A/B testing tools. We've listed some out on the right-hand side. Ultimately, we can integrate with anything that we need to, but it's making it as seamless as possible. So ultimately, with the ones you can see on the screen, you can bring through any kind of a test ID that you have sitting against any of the tests that are set up. You can bring it straight through into SessionCam and overlay that against the reports we have, the reports we talked through at the beginning of the session. So being able to do that allows to compare things like heat maps side by side and funnels side by side and understand the difference in behavior from different variants of a particular test. It's worth noting as well, I guess it's kind of two other key pieces to this, is that when you're setting up a test in these various A/B testing tools, sometimes there's a little bit of a work to be done to set up some of the success criteria and some of the different metrics you wish to record. When you come through to SessionCam, we're recording all of that data anyway. We're capturing everything in the background. So looking at something like customer struggle score or a heat map side by side, there's no kind of setup needed. Once the integration is working, the ID comes through, you can apply that to any of the reports that we have available within the console. So it's really, really easy. The value you get is easy to see, it's plain to see. If you can match up what you have within those A/B testing tools with what we have within SessionCam, obviously the power becomes, power goes to your hands. Melanie's going to talk through some of that in just a second. And the last thing that I'll kind of add as well is that, as well as integrating with the A/B testing tools, we absolutely have integrations with analytics tools as well. So direct integrations whereby you can bring, GA or Adobe segments, for example, straight through to SessionCam, and you can use them in conjunction with, all the A/B testing integration we have available as well. So you can kind of bulk those up in terms of the segments. You can use all of the SessionCam segments alongside them. So it becomes extremely powerful when you have this kind of suite of tools all feeding into SessionCam. So yeah, that's how the integration works. And again, if there's any questions, obviously, push them through to the chat.
Thanks, Shane. So now we'll talk a little bit about, how that integration, works with your A/B testing strategy. So kind of break it down by, the stage of your experimentation strategy. So before you test, you can use SessionCam to identify problems with that integration that James kind of described, as well as the different features. So we'll get into some specific examples of that. So before you test, it really comes down to using SessionCam's features to identify problems and prioritize test ideas. So some of the questions that you may have before you decide to, add a test to a list of tests that you want to run, or prioritize a test to actually build on your site. These are some of the questions that you may want to answer if you're doing some type of structured experimentation with hypothesis and developing KPIs. So essentially, we need to know, which pages are most in need of optimization. So of course, you'll look at your analytics data, whether that be Google Analytics or Adobe, whatever tool you're using. You take the data that you have available and figure out where your users are struggling. So SessionCam has features that can help you answer these questions. So is there more potential for improvement on mobile or desktop for a particular feature or page? Are there any errors that prevent people from converting? What elements are distracting users from completing key behaviors? What elements are users missing completely? So are they going on the page and just completely missing your CTA? Are there any form fields that cause user friction or hesitation? So on most sites, a form is definitely something that people have to do to convert, whether that be through e-commerce or subscribing to an email. That's definitely something we want to focus on for areas of opportunity. So when it comes to answering the question of which pages are most in need of optimization, the struggle detection feature in SessionCam can really help you pull out those pages in need of some help. So as Jim showed previously with the struggle detection feature, you can log in and put in your inputs in terms of a date range. So if you have made some changes recently, or you just want to get a historical kind of view of pages that users are frequently struggling on, you can use this feature. So these are pages that are causing some type of user frustration. That customer struggle score adds some context to your web analytics data. So you may see in web analytics that there is, maybe some page that isn't performing well based on your business objectives or your KPIs, or a template, for a number of pages. This is an opportunity to kind of dig in and view the recordings or the heat maps for those pages. And it also helps you to streamline your test prioritization process. So if you have pages that have a really high customer struggle score, these pages should definitely be prioritized for optimization. That's a somewhat common problem if you're doing a lot of A/B testing. You may have so many tests that you just don't know which ones you need to run first. So this is a way to kind of break that down and view the biggest issues on your site quickly. So what elements are distracting users from converting? So a number of features in SessionCam can kind of reveal these, but session replay is definitely a great place to start. So if you start by looking at the pages with those high customer struggle scores, you can really dig in and view recordings of some sessions where that high struggle score happens. So you get to watch how users interact with your site to understand the problems, distractions, and errors possibly by viewing these mouse movements, clicks and taps, page scrolling, mobile gestures. So you can actually see where people are clicking, if they're clicking on something that really isn't something they should click on, and really trying to understand, why they're scrolling back and forth so much. Are there other CTAs that are too close to the main, action you want them to take? So how can we make it easier for the user to focus on the main goal of that page or that template? So session replay can really reveal those opportunities for testing. So is there more potential for improvement on mobile or desktop for a particular page or template? The page analysis feature has some really great details that you can use to compare mobile to desktop experience. So this is a little example actually from our site. It's going to kind of inform some A/B testing that we'll do soon. But if you look at the kind of long scroll of the page of desktop versus mobile, there's a lot of great information on those pages, and we're glad that people are taking the time to scroll down. But we also want to understand how we can help get people to the point that is most interesting to them. So when it comes to our main conversion on this page, we want people to join our no layoff pledge, which we hope, if there's a possibility for you that you'll join too. But the actual objective of the page is way down at the bottom. And you can see through the page analysis feature, the click-through rate for desktop versus mobile. So just kind of open some opportunities for analysis, maybe some testing of maybe adding a link to the form a little bit earlier in the page that for people that have already heard about our no layoff pledge and want to join. So you'll see in the mobile CTA that it takes almost 68 seconds to get to the main point of conversion on those pages. So you can do this for your pages as well, to really understand how much users' device affects their experience and what changes you can make to improve the click-through rate or the click rate on those key elements, and hopefully reduce the average time to click if it makes sense for that page. Of course, if it's a blog page, you know, you may not want to reduce that average time to click. It really just depends on what your objective is for that page. Are there any errors that prevent people from converting? So there's, you know, a possibility that you may be tracking errors already in your analytics tool, which is great. It's a great way to detect errors. But sometimes even analytics doesn't, you know, or fails to pick up all of those errors that people are seeing. So the error detection feature of SessionCam, you know, shows you a list of errors, how frequently they're happening, how many sessions, what the error rate is. So you can really get a feel for, you know, if it's a technical error or if it's a user error that can be prevented by you providing more details and more context on the page. So, you know, are people encountering this error message because you're not clear in your directions on the form? Or is it just, you know, some type of technical issue that you can fix without testing? Of course, if there's something that you could fix without testing, this is a good opportunity to just make those quick, you know, low-hanging fruit changes. But sometimes it is an opportunity for testing your messaging or your language or the, you know, the visual effect of that page. What elements distract users from completing key behaviors? So the Heatmap feature of SessionCam is a great feature to use for this. Sometimes we think that we've designed a page or you know, an element that is clear to the user, or we think that it's clear to them how they should proceed on a page. But sometimes the heat map will show you that what we assume is not true. So the heat maps help you to visualize what does and does not grab the user's attention. So are users scrolling down far enough to see your key conversion points? Are they clicking on elements that aren't clickable or completely missing important elements? So with SessionCam, you can use the click and hover heat maps as well as the scroll heat maps to kind of view and aggregate how people are engaging with these key pages. So it's a great opportunity for coming up with test ideas and adding context in the places that people are already viewing or mousing over. Are there any form fields that cause user friction or hesitation? This is also something that you may be tracking in Google Analytics or your analytics tool, but this form an analytics feature of SessionCam can also add some additional context. So you can identify reasons behind form abandonment. Some of the issues to look out for when you see these issues in SessionCam is a weak or unclear value proposition, or CTA, form field fatigue, when you just have way too many form fields. You know, generally people don't like to fill out 25 field form required versus optional fields, and making sure that's clear to the user. So a lot of times we'll see error messages on forms where it's not clear that something is required for them to submit the form. And finally, error messages. So this is another place where error messages could be coming into play on a key point of conversion. So with the SessionCam form analytics, you can see field re-entries, which tells you, you know, how often people are, you know, starting to fill in a form field and then starting over, usually indicating that something is unclear to them, or maybe they just don't want to fill in that particular form field. Also, average field time, telling you how long it takes people to fill out a particular form field. So sometimes it makes sense that it may take them a little bit longer to fill out a particular form field, or sometimes you'll look at it and really have to figure out, well, why does it take them 20 seconds to fill out a form field that should just be one word? So these are opportunities to test opportunities for optimizing your forms and plugging that into your A/B testing tool. So we've gone through a lot of different questions that you can answer using SessionCam when you're at the beginning of, kind of the test ideation phase. So what do you do with this information? So if you're doing some type of prioritization or using a prioritization methodology, this is where you would plug that in to really add context about the potential for improvement. So we frequently use the PI model, which aggregates your potential, importance, and ease of developing a test and generates a PI score. So when it comes to potential, generally we measure that by opportunities for improvement from web analytics data, voice of customer data, and in this case with SessionCam, we could look at things like, the CS score, customer struggle or errors, and just kind of quantify the opportunity for potential when it comes to prioritizing your test. We also look, of course, at importance. So, what would it cost to make this improvement, traffic volume, return on investment for the pages that we need to improve, and then finally ease, whether that be technical or political, getting buy-in across your organization. So it's just another way to use data to decide which tests are most important to your business objectives. So after you test, you can also use SessionCam to enrich your data from your A/B testing tool to make decisions. So during or after your test, SessionCam's features also help you make decisions about what to implement and what not to implement. So some of the questions that you may have after you run a test or while you're running a test, do the changes we've made affect how users scroll down the page? Does this have a detrimental effect to any other CTA? Sometimes we see that where we improve one CTA, or one objective, but another one, declines as a result. Do the changes made to the variant show increases or decreases in clicks on key elements on the page? Do the changes we've made change how users hover and pause over elements on the page? So these are all questions that we can answer using SessionCam. So we've talked about a number of these features already, but one of the features that we haven't really talked about a lot yet is the ability to apply filters and segments. So based on the integrations that you set up in SessionCam, you can view heat maps, recordings, and errors based on specific experiments or your analytics tool. So for example, Google Analytics. So you can use Google segments that are linked to your integrated Google Analytics views. So you can filter users by any segment that you've built in your Google Analytics property and view that you linked. You can also use the built-in SessionCam filters or the custom SessionCam filters that you set up that allow you to filter down by browser, device, a page they visited, a date range. There's a number of different options that allow you to filter and segment those sessions. And specifically, just an example from an integration with Google Optimize. So this integration allows you to understand the qualitative impact of your experiment. So with this integration, you can segment your SessionCam recording using your variants as filters. So this is a custom segment that was set up that allows you to enter the Google Optimize experiment ID as a filter option. So once you've applied this filter, you can compare struggle scores between variants and the original, view heat maps for a clearer understanding of how variants impact user experience. So once that's integrated, you can use that on all of your Google Optimize tests. So like I said, once you have integrated things with SessionCam, whether that be Google Analytics or Google Optimize or whatever tools you're using, you can apply those filters to do side-by-side comparisons. So for a heat map, it definitely makes sense during or after your test to compare the heat maps of the control versus the variant. This answers a lot of questions and really supplements your findings from your A/B testing platform to have that data before committing to a final change. So all of the different types of heat maps have some different benefits. So when it comes to scroll reach, you know, some of the questions that this may answer are, do the changes we've made affect how users scroll down the page? So are we making a change that is keeping people engaged and actually scrolling down further and seeing all of the points we want them to see? Does this have a detrimental effect to any other CTAs? So by moving something up the page, did we prevent people from seeing something else important further down the page? Mouse movement. Do the changes we've made change how users hover and pause over elements on the page? And finally, click heat maps. Do the changes we've made to the variant show increases or decreases in clicks on key elements on the page? So a lot of times we're using heat maps before we prioritize a test to decide where to place, you know, a conversion message or make a change. So after we test, we compare the before and after to see if our hypothesis was true and if the change we made actually improved the initial issue we uncovered. You can do the same thing with your session replay, where you can compare the control versus the variant using those SessionCam or Google segments and filters. So comparing the before and after or the control versus the variant allows you to see these actual user interactions with your variant to kind of overlay that with your statistical data from your A/B testing platform. So sometimes you may just want to pull one of these examples into your you know, A/B test reports just to show and support your data from your A/B testing platform. So does your hypothesis prove true or false based on these user recordings in addition to that actual statistical analysis? And then session or control versus variant for your struggle detection. So we talked about this several times with SessionCam. You know, a number of struggle sessions may be revealed to you when you're, you know, coming up with test ideas. So you can compare your struggle scores before, during, and after your test to see if customer struggle decreases for the pages you are testing. So you know, have that kind of graphical interface to look through and see if those CS scores are changing over time. And you can also look for the specific pages that you're making changes to. So check for increases on related pages or other pages on the customer journey, just to see how the changes you're making may have a trickle-down effect to other parts of the user journey or the experience. So lots of options here for analysis after your test. So again, we've posed a lot of questions that SessionCam could answer as you're going through the post test analysis phase. So what do you actually do with this information? So you take this data that you have in SessionCam, find examples, and just essentially add context and insights to your reports and decision-making process. So a lot of times we'll do some type of test report where there's not a, you know, super clear winner or the results are not as strong or clear as you'd like for all objectives. So you can pull in this information to add that context when there's a weak or unclear statistical result, or if you just want more proof or more data points to really complete your analysis. So just simply add that to your report to share that with members of your team before making your final decision. So we've talked about SessionCam and all of its features, how they can elevate your A/B testing strategy by helping you to decide, first of all, what to test, and finally, what to implement after your test. So session replay, heat mapping, the error detection and struggle pages, and page analysis features all help you to determine your priorities for testing and make decisions after you've run your test. As we showed in a couple of different places here today, SessionCam integrates some of the most popular A/B testing platforms available today. The Google Analytics and Google Optimize integrations make analysis and decision-making even easier. So that built-in integration allows you to apply those analytics segments and optimize experiment IDs to really make it a little more simple for you to analyze and add to your test reports. So that completes the webinar today, but we do have some time for questions. I see a number of questions have come in. So we'll start to get into answering some of those questions. We also see our contact information is available here. If you have any questions for Sam or for myself, our email addresses are up on the screen. And like I said, this recording of the webinar will also be available on our site if you would like to review it later. All right, so let's take a look at some of the questions that come in. All right. So James, probably a lot of these questions are going to be for you.
Yeah.
Do historical session recordings break if the layout changes over time?
No, so it's a good question. No, they don't. So ultimately what we do at the point of recording is we capture all the assets which exist on the page at that particular time, and we store those and version those off. So when it comes to creating a playback for you to watch, we pull on those assets based on the time period and the recording you've selected, and we rebuild that within the replay window exactly as it looked at the time. So ultimately, no, it doesn't at all. What you see in the replay is exactly what the the customer or the visitor saw at the time they were using the site.
Great. How easily can heat maps be exported so others can see a heat map?
So you can download the heat maps. We added this functionality a little while ago, so you can download them as PDFs, and what that kind of allows you to do is obviously to populate, as you mentioned, reports nice and easily. So once you've downloaded them, they stay available for a period of time, so you haven't got to go and find them in a file you've dumped somewhere on your PC. And yeah, the most common I think for that is to help visualize stuff for people who maybe aren't in the tool as much as you are. So yeah, you can absolutely download them in those PDF formats.
Okay. Can you tell me more about how the struggle algorithm works?
Yep, so the struggle score works so I kind of touched briefly on it earlier, but we're looking at everything that's happening within a particular session, all the interactions and engagements that the visitor or customer shows on that particular page, and we're trying to ascertain what the average user is doing. So by using those and building all of those up, we get an idea and a picture, as I mentioned, of how long people are spending on the page, how many times they're having to click. Do they kind of go back and forth to the same page, sort of pointing out that something isn't clear? Do they have to change the orientation on a mobile device to understand the content that's on the page? There's a whole host of different things, around 100 different behaviors which are fed into that. And by capturing that average, we then start to see people who don't sit within those boundaries, and we grade all the sessions based on this sort of 0 to 5, 5 being the highest level of struggle, 0 being the lowest. And it makes it very, very easy to then start to understand which sessions are kind of performing poorly or which pages are performing poorly. And that's really how the struggle score works within the recording screen. So when you're looking at an individual recording, you can actually see a breakdown of the struggle score, and you can see what was the biggest contributor to struggle on that page or that session at that time. So by hovering over within the recording screen on the customer struggle score, which is attached to that session, you can see if it was the errors which were causing the biggest amount of friction, or the time spent on the page, or the scrolling activity. So it kind of really helps to pinpoint what you're looking for within those sessions, and therefore, you know, trying to understand exactly what's happening on that particular page.
Great. All right, we have several more questions coming in. How does SessionCam work with single page apps and in particular PWA sites?
So becoming more and more common, I guess, this way of building sites. So we use various different methods. I think the most common would be what we call virtual pages. So creating kind of virtual points where the page is changing. And that means we can separate the data for every page, even if, say, the URL, for example, is saying exactly the same as mentioned here. So as the page changes, we capture it in a slightly different way, and we can then break out customer struggle score and errors and revenue and all the things you saw, the heat maps, the page analysis, all based on that particular version of the page. So there's yeah, there's kind of no sort of disparity between having sort of those merged together. They all appear as individual pages within SessionCam when you come through to look at them.
Great. Does SessionCam integrate into Adobe Analytics and Qualtrics?
Yep, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier, you can bring through the segments from analytics tools directly into SessionCam. You know, you touched on it a little bit earlier on, bringing the GA segments through. And once it's set up, they all come through automatically. So there's no kind of you know, having to manage that. They're all brought through. You can select from a populated list of those segments and apply it again to the reports, which you mentioned a little bit earlier on. So absolutely, yes.
Okay. And who tends to use SessionCam inside an organization?
It's used across various organizations in various different ways. You know, I guess the most popular obviously is understanding the engagement with the site. So CRO is kind of one of our core use cases, and then, you know, understanding interaction with the content on the page, you know, for A/B testing. They're kind of the key ones, but you see it in a multitude of different parts of businesses. So we see it across some who use it for things like fraud, you know, and for customer service as well. So in terms of fraud, you know, if you're looking at things like field interactions, which you mentioned earlier as well, you know, we capture when people are re-entering lots of information lots of the time. We can capture, you know, what a lot of people call bad actors, for example. And with customer service, you know, depending on what you're capturing within the replay itself, you know, obviously we don't capture any personal information, but you have the opportunity, if it sits within your criteria, within the certificates you have on the site, to capture a name or an email address. If customers know you're capturing that, then we can absolutely unmask that. It's master standard. But if you're looking at it and someone comes through to the call center and is having an issue, then you can go back and watch that session to understand, you know, exactly what was going on. So there's a whole host of different reasons and different ways in which SessionCam is used across businesses. But as I say, you know, CRO, A/B testing, understanding engagement with content on the pages, and understanding where the pain points are is absolutely where it's kind of used most. But, you know, it has a whole host of different uses.
Great. And then one last question, it looks like, why can't I track or see an embedded video like YouTube videos?
So it depends entirely on how the video is embedded. So if it's based on if it's YouTube hosting and it's YouTube hosting that part of the page, then obviously we can't capture that. But there's lots of scenarios where they're embedded within kind of the code based on your page itself. So then in that case we will capture it. So it just you know, depends entirely on the way it's set up, I guess, as to whether we see those videos or not. But in terms of engagement with them, because they sit as an element, you should see all the engagement statistics, such as clicks and hovers, and all the things you mentioned before, you know, average time to click and revenue conversion based on those interaction types.
Great. All right, I think that was all of the questions. We have one final poll to throw up. Are you interested in further conversations with a member of the SessionCam or InfoTrust team? Feel free to fill that in if you'd like to be contacted to schedule a call. I'm glad to show you more information or share more information on how you could utilize SessionCam or utilize SessionCam with your, you know, A/B testing platform. So feel free to fill up your responses. Great, I think most people have responded. And finally, just not maybe you already have been on our site and our resources, but just always want to point out that we have a number of webinars scheduled, a number of resources on our site or on-demand webinars. So always a good place to look for more ideas about, you know, analytics, SessionCam. We have a blog that we recently published about improving your user experience with SessionCam and Google Optimize. But yeah, check out our resources and our upcoming webinars. There's a webinar coming up next week on CCPA, definitely a hot topic right now. So everybody, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining the webinar, and definitely reach out if there's any questions you have or anything we can help with. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining.